Hiya, I'm at Lauriston Castle today, as you can see right behind me. A 16th century tower house turned Edwardian mansion, turned time capsule, turned museum. How fun is that? I was fortunate enough to take part in the castle's annual spring clean conducted by Museums and Galleries Edinburgh. So today I'm going to take you on a little virtual tour of the inside of the building, where we'll delve into the building's history and discuss why conservation efforts such as what I was doing inside there are actually really, really important. Hello and welcome if you're new. Welcome back if you're not. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy yourself. Please and thanks. I'll leave the contact information for Lauriston Castle below if you feel like checking it out for yourself and booking yourself a little in-person tour alongside my bibliography as well, as per usual. Now, in the words of Julie Andrews, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Teehee. First ever time filming actually outside in front of people. Success. We've done it, troops. Okay, let's go in. Understand Lauriston, we're going to take a whistle-stop tour through time and visit some of its previous owners. Now, I'm not going to mention every previous owner of Lauriston because there was absolutely loads, just those who've had a significant impact on the estate and its aesthetics. Our timeline begins in AD 1290. Lauriston was first mentioned in the Exchequer Roll and was listed as owned by the Crown. To be more specific, it was owned by Margaret Maid of Norway, who was Queen of Scotland at the time, despite never actually leaving Norway. The original tower house was destroyed in 1544 by the Earl of Hertford and his troops during the Rough Wooing, the same Earl who also sacked Holyrood Abbey. The only original surviving feature is the well, which is now incorporated into the outer courtyard, but at the time that was kind of yards from the original building. In 1590, Archibald Napier of Merchiston owned the property and he rebuilt the previously destroyed tower house. Jumping forward to 1683 now, when the Law family owned Lauriston, but they never actually set foot inside it. Never lived in the house, but there was a very, very notorious member of their family, which is why I think they're worth mentioning. And that is John. John Law. John was a mathematician and a gambler who was charged for murder of a man in a duel. Is it murder if you're challenged to a duel? But before he could be charged, he fled to France, where he put his financial skills to work in the banks. So he made a lot of cash. And although he received a royal pardon in 1721, he never returned to Scotland at all. Never mind the Lauriston property. The next notable owner is Thomas Allen, who owned Lauriston from 1823 to 1833. Thomas was a mineralogist and the owner of the old Caledonian Mercury newspaper, which no longer exists, I don't think. Thomas commissioned William Byrne, who was a big-time architect of the time, to extend the house for the first time ever. William was first going to knock down the original tower house building.
Huh?
But some guy convinced him not to. I think his name was Sir Walter Scott. I've never heard of him, so I don't really know. He must have been like a friend at the time, I don't know, but he convinced them to just keep the original tower house standing. After Thomas, the estate was owned by Andrew Lord Rutherford, the MP for Leith. He commissioned another big-time architect of his time, William Playfair. He employed him to landscape the gardens, which are still somewhat in his design today, and also construct the outer porches at the doors, including the front porch, which is still decorated with the Rutherford family crest. The crest features a mermaid holding a brush and a mirror, and the motto reads, "By land and by sea." Don't worry, we're nearly there, folks. Just a couple more to go now. I know this is sort of an info dump, but don't worry, we're nearly past it, I promise. In 1871, it was owned by Thomas McKnight Crawford, and he's the one who sold to the Reeds in 1902. The Reeds are responsible for all the collections and the interiors within Lauriston that you can still see today, and that we're going to be looking at together today. The couple loved their travels and collected furniture from across the globe, especially France and Italy. They really, really liked French and Italian furniture. Mr. William Reed was owner of Morrison & Co., which was a well-established Scottish furniture company, and there are a lot of examples of his own furniture from his company in the house as well. Mr. William Barton also lived with the Reeds. That was Mrs. Reed's brother. He owned the family business of Barton and Sons, which focused on plumbing and sanitary development. So together the Reeds and Mr. Barton are responsible for the Edwardian modern electricity and plumbing within Lauriston Castle. Mr. Reed died on the 14th of April 1919 at the age of 64 after years of declining health. None of the trio had heirs either, so it was agreed that the house would be left as a museum, as an education to the nation. So when Mrs. Reed died in 1926, that's exactly what happened. William Reed, Margaret Reed, William Barton and their head housekeeper Annie Mackay are all buried at Cramond Kirk, next to Cramond Roman Fort and the Cramond Lioness, which I have told you all about before if you recognise that name. If you've not seen that video, I will leave it linked up here somewhere. I can't remember what corner it goes in, but you get what I mean. It'll be linked, you can watch that afterwards. The first custodian of the house was Mr. John Fairley, who was a good friend of the Reeds and actually wrote an entire book on the property. And Lauriston first opened its doors to the public in 1929. Oh, hello! Sorry, I got a bit cholty-walled. That means cold. But now it's time for the bit you've all been waiting for, the actual virtual tour of Lauriston Castle. We're going to start at the highest peak of the tallest tower and work our way down. Simply because that's how we cleaned it and that's the easiest for my little brain to follow and to handle. Now this is not going to include every single nook and cranny. If you want to see that, book a tour for yourself. I'll leave the information in the description box below. Anyway, when I say that we're starting at the very top, I mean the very top. That's right, I was on the roof. I am such a little fangirl for this house, it's atrocious. The top floor here consists of 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and this was where the first week of our cleaning journey began. I was like a wee kid in awe, taking in the whole house and all the sights. It was such an amazing feeling. With such extravagant bits of furniture too. Like this magnificent wooden carving and these intricate fireplace tiles, which I could have looked at for ages, to be honest. I know that sounds really weird, but I could have. I was mainly cleaning in the single guest bedroom and the bathroom as well, where I was charged with dusting, polishing, hoovering, and most importantly, heavy lifting, because your girl's swole, your girl's got muscles. And I won't lie, this week was mostly me taking photos because I was far too nervous and far too shy to ask if I could film outright. It's silly, I know, but by week 4, I'm pure Steven Spielberg, I promise. Coming down to the next landing, we have Mr. Barton's bedroom. As I said earlier, Mr. Barton was the brother of Mrs. Maggie Reed and the owner of Barton & Sons Plumbing and Sanitary Company. And I really like his room, despite it being smaller than some of the others. It has that cosy vibe that I really like. The ceiling's a lot lower, but it is in the older part of the original townhouse? Tower house. I'm going to make that mistake so many times in this video, I swear. One thing he liked to do as well was collect miniature portraits, which are still up on the walls in his bedroom today, as well as portraits of his mum and dad above the fireplace, which I really like. The eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed this quirky looking hidden doorway underneath the wallpaper in his room. Don't get excited, there's no hidden passageways. Or is there? No, I'm only joking, there's not. But his room does have access to another bit of the roof, with a gorgeous view over the Firth of Forth and the old folks playing croquet on the croquet fields. Love that for him. I don't think the croquet fields were there when Mr. Barton and the Reeds actually stayed there, but how funny would that be if they were? Mr. Barton unfortunately died of influenza turned pneumonia on the 21st of December 1911. He, along with Mr. and Mrs. Reed, went down to London to see some Christmas shows, and unfortunately he did not make it back. Coming further down the stair, we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of the building now. This view is entering from the front entrance where the Rutherford crest adorns the front door. And we're greeted by this magnificent stairway, carved of stone, which leads up to the main hall. Just so you can understand my thought process here. From the main hall, I'm going to go around sort of clockwise through each room. Just for my own mental simplicity, please and thank you, before we go further down the hall to the rest of the building. The first room we come to is the oak room, which I wasn't cleaning in, so I didn't actually spend too much time in it, but it's still a gorgeous room to look at, getting its name from the oak furniture inside it. And it's a lovely office space. I was going to say that like I'm trying to sell you the house there. Like a study, that's the word for it, a study. A lovely room, but unfortunately not very photogenic, not very camera friendly at all, because it's a very dark room, because the shutters were shut. but that's fine. Let's move into Mrs. Reed's bedroom, and what an elegant bedroom it is. This is such a gorgeous room. Margaret was a very well educated woman, despite women in general not being allowed a full university level education in her time. She could even speak multiple languages, which I would assume came in very handy on the couple's travels. She had passions for history, physiology, photography, and playing the piano. She was also a very social woman, from what we know of her, despite her husband being more of the quiet and reserved type. Now the sitting room is yet again one of my favourite rooms in the entire house. Not only because of the miniature dying Gaul statue on top of the dresser in here, hello! The dying Gaul is one of my favourite Roman statues ever created. But that's another video for another time that I plan on doing. Just know that when I saw this little guy on the dresser, I knew I was meant to be in that house because I love it. I love it. This room is actually where Mrs. Reed was rumoured to have been burning documents and correspondences in the fire. What was she hiding? Who was she hiding it from? Probably just getting rid of a bunch of old receipts that she had no use for, to be honest. But you never know, the intrigue's there. We can also see some examples of the couple's fine Blue John collection in the sitting room, plus yet another gorgeous view across the Forth. If you would like a separate video about the phenomenon of Blue John, please let me know in the comments and I will happily do a whole separate video on that, because that is something I didn't know about until visiting Lauriston and how it was a whole big trend at the time. For another time perhaps. And then finally, to complete our whole clockwise movement round the main hall, we come to the dining room, which I spent a lot of time in, mainly staring at these absolutely beautiful walls. The dining room looks out over the front lawn, yet another brilliant view. This house is surrounded by brilliant views, to be fair. And I felt really at home with my ancestors in this one because I spent my time hoovering, dusting and polishing the silver. Fun fact about me that I've discovered, I love polishing silver. I think it's great fun. It's just instant satisfaction when you polish silver. It's great. Not to mention all of the cutlery was inscribed with little R's on the handle, R for Reed. We're going to move down the corridor now to the library. The library is absolutely amazing with some incredible volumes within that collection, and a bookcase door leading to yet another hidden room, another underground passageway. It leads to the art room. Guys, everyone calm down. The library is gorgeous. I remember when I visited the house in primary school, the library is probably the main room that sticks out to me in my memory. I could live in it. To be honest, I could live in that one room alone. They also had these intriguing little, they're not buttons, little carved pieces of these little white stones that have been carved with various scenes and like little portraits and scenes from myth as well. I saw one that looked like it had Achilles carved into it. If anyone knows what these are, can you please tell me? Because I've seen them all over the place and I can't find what they are or what they're supposed to be or represent. If anybody knows, please tell me, because I'm very interested into looking into them more. Thanks. We're about to head downstairs now, but before we go all the way down the stairs, we have to stop by the butler's pantry. I spent an entire day cleaning this little room and it was actually really fun. I've never had so much fun cleaning in my entire life and I probably never will again. We did a really good job though. We really did. Despite it being called the butler's pantry though, the Reeds never actually had a butler. The majority of their staff were female. The head housekeeper being Annie Mackay, who I mentioned earlier, is buried next to the Reeds and Mr. Barton at Crammon Kirkyard. And Annie became a very good friend of Mrs. Reed. Obviously being the head housekeeper, they spending a lot of time together, especially in later life after Mr. Reed died. This room is used as a halfway point between the downstairs kitchens and the upstairs dining room. Obviously it's the perfect place to bring the food up, tray it all up nice on the nice crockery. There's the word, crockery. All the nice plates and all the nice cutlery and that, and then take it through to the dining room where it will actually be served. And there's also an adorable photo of the Lauriston cat in this room, so it's still keeping its eye on the butler's pantry. The Reeds were quite fond of animals and had a couple of dogs, and from what I've researched, I know they have the one cat. Come on down the stairs now, where we're having a look at the final few rooms we have on this little tour. The ground floor is home to the kitchen and a few more guest bedrooms as well, including this one with these gorgeous hand-painted walls. I think they're hand-painted, they look hand-painted, right next to the windows. These are absolutely gorgeous. My first task on the floor was to clean this teeny tiny little spider-infested bathroom. It's okay, the spiders were dead, but I was a little bit afraid. And the Reeds did not spare on the furniture for their guest bedrooms at all. Each of these rooms is fully kitted out with either fancy furniture from their holidays or again more Morrison & Co. fancy furniture. Our final stop is the kitchen, which is also still fully kitted out. Ovens in the fireplace and cooking utensils, cooking pots, it's all there. Obviously there's been a few modern additions to this room. There's some chairs and a big projector screen. Contrary to popular belief, those are not from Edwardian times. The kitchen still sees a lot of footfall in the form of not only tour groups, but film screenings and lectures and activities for kids groups and various activities that are fun for the whole family. They've got an array of events that run throughout the year if you're interested in looking at those too. So conservation. Why bother? Conservation and preservation is not only important at Lauriston, but at every single historical site around the world. It's important for the longevity of objects and artefacts and what we can learn from them, either on their own or in their context. And Lauriston is the perfect example of Edwardian objects in their Edwardian context. But also the objects are still tangible and there in front of you, so that you can handle them and you can learn from them on their own. Unlike objects that are in a museum database and all you can see is the flat photos or drawings of them, but you can't physically hold and examine the object in front of you. Does that make sense? Carefully cleaning each room and each item as we did in this manner, working from the top all the way to the very bottom, allowed us to make everything look nice, obviously, but also allowed us to examine everything for any new damage that might have been done, any sort of breakage, decay, mould, pest damage, all those sorts of things, so that they could be noted, reported and rectified if possible. All that yummy stuff. Mould, And not just for our sake or for the sake of making the house look nice, but so that it's preserved and we can learn from it in the future, and future generations can come up, visit Lauriston and maybe find a new interest and learn about that new interest. And that's something that I believe is important to not just Lauriston but every single site, to allow these sites to last into the future so that future generations can learn from them, and maybe in the future they'll have better technologies than we do and they'll be able to unlock even more answers than we can. Am I starting to sound a bit silly? I hope not. I've been sat here for ages. I think my brain's turning to mush a little bit. Lauriston Castle is a time capsule of Scottish Edwardian middle class life, showcasing the best of the Reeds collections as they were designed and portrayed by the Reeds themselves. Castle has withstood years of extension and renovation to turn it into the form of house that you see it as today. And the work that I took part in with Museums and Galleries for has helped to preserve this castle for future generations, as I said just 2 seconds ago. But it's also taught me a lot of valuable skills, which I hope to take forth with me and use further in my career when it comes to actual preservation of artefacts and sites and things like that. I'll leave the contact information for Lauriston Castle in the description box below if you'd like to book your own tour or read more about it, as well as my entire bibliography will also be down there, so you can fact check me if you must. I know that sometimes people like to do that. If you have any questions about Lauriston, please leave them in the comments. I'll be sure to answer them if I can, or if not, I'll ask someone who does know the answer. And if any of you have been to Lauriston in the past, I'd love to hear your stories about your time either on the grounds or physically in the castle if you went in, so please leave them in the comments as well. I'd love to read your stories. Thank you so much to Museums and Galleries Edinburgh for having me. I really enjoyed my time here. I hope you all enjoyed, I hope you all learned something. If not, what I always say, watch it again and take notes this time. Bye troops. Thanks all for watching and I shall see you all next Tuesday.